morning. My name is Kadeen Smith. I am the project coordinator for the Caribbean Future E-Forum. Welcome to the fourth episode of our webinar series, the CaribWebDialogue. This is the fourth in a new series of Caribbean Future Forum webinars, which kicked off on Friday, the 28th of August, 2015. The first webinar brought together young thinkers and UN officials and focused on what the Sustainable Development Goals will mean for people in the Caribbean. Our second webinar then addressed the issue of environmental sustainability and looked at ways in which the Caribbean as a region can combat climate change and sustainably use our oceans and terrestrial ecosystems. Our third webinar focused on youth and the environment, in particular the roles that the youth of the Caribbean can play in addressing environmental issues. Today I'm very happy to present our webinar that will be led by the Commonwealth Secretariat, and it will focus on the blue economy. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to our chair at the Commonwealth, Rosemary. She is the legal advisor of the Ocean Governance and Natural Resources Division. Rosemary.
Thank you, Kadeen. It's my pleasure today to chair the panel today. I have very seasoned panelists on this topic. With me here in London today is Dr. Julian Roberts, a senior advisor in the Commonwealth Secretariat's Ocean Governance and Natural Resources Advisory Division. Julian provides advice on planning and management of marine resources to Commonwealth member governments. He holds a PhD in International Maritime Policy and an MSc in Marine Resource Management. Julian has more than 20 years' experience in this field on a broad range of marine issues that include coastal zone management, pollution control, international shipping, offshore petroleum exploration and production, and, more importantly, marine spatial planning. Julian has worked widely across the Commonwealth, including in the Pacific and Indian Ocean regions, as well as in the Caribbean. During this time, he's worked with member countries that are keen to explore the development of the blue economy at the national level. Also with us today in the Seychelles is Ms. Rebecca Losto-Lalane. Rebecca was appointed Principal Secretary for the Blue Economy Department in the Seychelles Ministry of Finance, Trade and the Blue Economy in February 2015. Rebecca holds a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from Middlesex University, London. Before joining the Ministry of Finance, Rebecca worked with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for 3 years as the First Secretary in the Multilateral Affairs Division. She worked on Commonwealth matters, United Nations environmental conventions, and work related to small island developing states. Rebecca has worked on implementing a lot of environmental-related development projects from donor funding in the Seychelles, which cover social welfare, good governance, and sustainable development. Welcome, Rebecca. What we'll start off with, without further ado, is a presentation from Julian, and I'll hand over to Julian.
So thank you very much, Rosemary, and good morning to those of you in the Caribbean. Just whilst we wait for the presentation to load, I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes on the sort of broad level perspective of the blue economy and introduce to you some of the countries that are working on this subject. And then we're going to hand over to Rebecca, who will speak specifically about the work that's being done in Seychelles. Okay, so the concept of the ocean-based or the blue economy has its origins in the green economy concept that was endorsed in 2012 by the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. And the concept stems really from the realization that small island states have significant areas of ocean compared to their land-based area. And this is an example of the Bahamas. And you can see that the land area here is quite small. But when you extend out into the Atlantic with its exclusive economic zone and the potential for it to extend its continental shelf, the area under its jurisdiction is quite significant. And the ratio is quite huge. So the land area is about 13,000 kilometres, and the EEZ is 630,000 square kilometres, so a huge resource base. One of the problems is that the blue economy is not well defined, and there are a number of different terms that are being bandied around. So the blue economy is one. The European Union used the term blue growth. Mauritius is working on its ocean economy. But all of these concepts are driving towards the same goals. And whilst there's no universally agreed definition for the blue economy, we can start to define what the basic look of a blue economy should be. So there are certain characteristics that we might see in a blue economy. The first one is that it recognises the essential value of natural capital as the basis for a healthy marine environment which supports ongoing activities. It maintains growth and fosters blue business, promoting jobs in those sectors. It promotes energy from low carbon and renewable sources. It addresses resource scarcity and promotes enhanced resource efficiency through improved and enhanced natural resource management. It ensures resilience from the impacts of climate change, supports the building of technical capacity needed to achieve these goals, and finally promotes sustainable management of the marine ecosystems. It's worth considering that in reality the concept of the blue economy is not new. Island nations in particular have benefited from their ocean resources for decades or even centuries, and marine uses and activities already contribute significantly to the overall economies of many island nations. And this includes a wide range of maritime sectors essential to both current and future economic development, such as tourism, fisheries, ports, and extraction of raw materials such as petroleum and mining. So we really need to ensure that the blue economy is not seen as a separate thing, but rather part of the current domestic activity, which supports many aspects of social, economic and environmental development. So a key premise is that sustainable economic development opportunities lie at the heart of the blue economy concept. And one of the key things is the use of this concept of natural capital, or marine ecosystem services. And the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment has provided a useful four-category framework within which to view ecosystem services that contribute to human well-being. And they are, the first being provisioning services, for example, the provision of wild foods and mineral resources, regulating services such as the filtration of pollutants by wetlands, climate regulation through carbon storage, and protection from natural hazards such as extreme weather events. Cultural services, for example, education, recreational, spiritual and aesthetic values that people hold dear from the ocean, and the supporting services in terms of its role in primary production and nutrient cycling. And just to give some sort of scale of the nature of these ecosystem services, this is a figure that was produced several years ago in a paper published by Constanza, which just shows where some of these ecosystem services lie that maybe we're not fully aware of. So there's now general recognition that the ocean offers coastal and island states with further potential for economic benefits to be derived from the sea, both in terms of living and non-living resources, and I've highlighted some of them up here. And there's also a general recognition that there are new opportunities which have yet to be exploited, particularly in small island states. And so among some of the opportunities that are out there that some of the countries we're working with are looking at include mariculture, i.e. the culture of marine organisms, particularly for food, but also as a base product for other resources. The use of the ocean as a source of marine renewable energy to help with energy security. The concept of blue biotechnology, which is adapting biological materials to produce higher value products. And some countries are starting to look at concepts around blue finance, which Rebecca will talk about in her example. But another example that people are looking at is the idea of carbon sequestration into coastal habitats, so-called blue carbon. Another key aspect of the blue economy is the concept of value chains. And value chains offer a significant opportunity to increase the value created from the existing resource base. So if we take an example here in terms of fisheries, most countries have a fishing fleet or a fishing industry which catches fish and sells the fish. And so there's a very, very short value chain. But those countries that have really extended the value chain have started to add value to that product by processing it into high quality and high end products. What becomes more important is when you start looking at the linkages between value chains. And so here's a second value chain for tourism, which is common to many small island states. And where we start to see this become very, very important is where the value chains start to combine. So here, for example, we have a product that we want to export, and we feed that into our transport services, whether it's air transport, whether it's maritime transport. But we also have a big consumer base in terms of tourists, so we can use this product to supply into our consumer base, therefore increasing the market for it. So the sort of outcomes that countries are looking for in terms of the blue economy include to achieve greater protection for their marine environment, because they recognise that those resources are what underpins the future economic development. So there's going to be a greater focus on protective measures and a greater use of surveillance and enforcement tools. A critical goal has to be generating new research and innovation about the ocean and how we can manage it and utilise it. There's a lot of focus on increasing investment, particularly in terms of existing ocean-based economic sectors, but also the new technologies that I mentioned earlier. We need to stimulate the development of new sectors, and I've given some examples, but there are a whole range of sectors out there that people are looking at. And all of this should come together to increase the number of what we might call blue businesses operating in the economy, and therefore the number of jobs that are created in the blue economy. So if we're going to create these solutions, we need to think about how we're going to enable the blue economy. And we need to recognise the interdependencies of the three dimensions of sustainable development, i.e. the economic, the social and the environmental. And the blue economy calls for intermediate action on all of these, as well as some overarching ones, which will be important. And just to finish here, I'll just run through some of these. So in terms of economic innovation, the blue economy needs to focus on the development of core economic sectors that we've talked about as the basis for future growth, but also to look at new ones. And we need to think about how we transform the patterns of investment, particularly when it comes to things like perverse subsidies around fisheries and that sort of thing. We need to recognise also the value of marine environmental goods and services, and so far we've been very poor at building those values into decision making. In terms of social innovation, we need to identify the future skills and needs and the labour market supply and demand trends. And we need to think about what education and vocational and professional training is going to be needed to put in place to support the growth of the blue economy. Another important area is increasing knowledge and awareness of the marine environment, particularly among communities. And they then need to understand what the blue economy means to them and how they can benefit from the blue economy. But at the core of the blue economy is the decoupling of our socio-economic impacts from environmental degradation. We really need to focus on the security of the resource base and the wider marine environment to ensure the long-term integrity of the ecosystem. Sorry, just catch up there. But sitting over the top of all of these are a series of overarching needs which have to be put in place. So integrated governance of the marine environment is a crucial aspect that all countries have got to focus on. And to ensure the security of your maritime domain in terms of who's doing what, in terms of securing the resource base, in terms of making sure there's no harmful activities causing pollution and those sort of things. And then, as I said earlier, a key element is going to be research, innovation and development to allow countries to better understand what their resource base is and how they can protect and utilise it. And just to give you a sense of the sort of countries that, some of which we've been working with, but that are working on blue economy or similar projects, this is just a map of ones that I'm familiar with and many of the countries that we're actually working with. And so that creates a nice little segue to allow Rebecca to talk specifically about the work that they're doing in Seychelles. So we'll just transfer the presentation across.
On the other side of the world, and it's dark on this end. And I just wanted to present a little bit the Seychelles case. So I've recently been appointed in early February to the Blue Economy Department. Is that okay? I can continue?
Yes, we can hear you and see your presentation, Rebecca.
Okay. So the Blue Economy Department was recently established and merged with the Ministry of Finance and Trade. And this was by design, because we felt that the entry point to be able to revalorize the ocean had to be linked to finance in looking forward on how we're going to change the game, because the blue economy concept for Seychelles is really about changing the current way of doing business. It has to be a game changer. So before I go into a bit more detail about that, where are we? Well, you should see a map of Seychelles at the moment, and we're located in the Indian Ocean. So 115 islands, not dissimilar from a lot of Euro countries, and we're 4 degrees south of the equator. We're also known for the sun, sea holidays, but as Julian had mentioned at the beginning of his presentation, the characteristic for all of us is the large EEZ that we have. So for Seychelles, 1.37 square kilometers makes up our EEZ. To present that in a different way, we're one of the smallest countries in the world by landmass, ranking about 173 in the world. But if we were to be considered by our size of the EEZ, the oceanic state, we rank 25th almost, approximately 25th in the world. And that really changes the dynamics of our trajectory for development. So Seychelles has always been dependent on its surrounding oceanic resource for economic and social development. And we decided about 3 years ago to embark on blue economy as a terminology, which stems from the green economy. So Julian, you can go to the next slide, where we really wanted to embrace the ocean-based economy. That sustainable growth has to revalorize the ocean as no longer just a resource, a free resource for extraction and an unlimited sink, for example, for disposal of waste, but that we had to value the services of the ocean, but to include it in the decision making at every step for our state in order to maximize the benefit and share it more equitably with the Seychelles people. So whilst there was no definition, and it's still an ongoing process at the international level, we decided to move on and define our blue economy in the national context. So as Julian mentioned, Mauritius, which is a neighboring country, chose to use ocean economy to define and to be better understood by their people. We felt we wanted to go with blue economy, and our concept really refers to economic activities that directly or indirectly take place in the ocean, including outputs, goods and services, and how these activities contribute to economic growth, social, cultural, and environmental well-being. Next slide, Julian. So through the implementation of our Seychelles Blue Economy as the governing sustainable development strategy, this is very important, it is benchmark in a sustainable development strategy plan. We're hoping to achieve 4 key objectives. So economic diversification, to reduce really the vulnerability of us as a SIDS, because our GDP derived from the marine sector is significant, with fisheries and tourism being the two main pillars of our economy. The second is the creation of high-value jobs. To note here, it's really more about adding value to the jobs. We have 90,000 people, very small human resource capacity, and we have to look at how we can increase job opportunities, but maximizing the level we can offer. The third one is ensuring food security, which is paramount for a small island state. And this is listed last, but it's probably the #1 priority for us. Hence, the fact that we've underlined 2 key words. It's to manage and protect the marine environment in a responsible and sustainable manner. This really has been at the core of Seychelles national development since the early 1990s, prior to the 3 Rio Conventions. So a lot of our national development strategies has been geared towards the balance of development with environmental resources. So we could go to the next slide, Julian. So keeping all of these points in mind, the scope of the Seychelles Blue Economy includes, so the bullets are there, activities which explore the ocean resource, uses it as an ocean space. So we want to create, or we want to revalorize ocean as a development space, not just land-based activities, but that the ocean provides a lot of solutions to a lot of to various issues that small island states are facing given our isolation and our vulnerabilities. We believe in protecting the ocean environment, using the ocean products as a main input, as well as the value addition, which provides goods and services to support the ocean activities. So next slide. This one should be about the Blue Economy Department. I just wanted to note that, as we said earlier on in the year, we created the Blue Economy Department to really be a headlining component of the Ministry of Finance. It's appreciated that the effective transition to a blue economy will be achieved through the coordination effort between all the various governmental ministries, civil society, and the private sector. It's not a new concept, but it's a new way of doing business. Blue economy has to be a shift. There are more trade-offs that we have to look at in a very holistic manner. So we didn't want it to be seen as a new idea and therefore a new strategy and a new department has to deal with it. Sector plans will still continue. Environment has a key role, tourism its key role, fisheries, and so on. The department therefore has the primary role of coordinating between the different ministries or NGOs on civil society to get any bottlenecks that we have in our system quickly removed, and the right people are talking at the right time to make sure that decisions that are taken have the ocean at the center. So we're overseeing a lot of synchronization between our existing sectors, institutions, and industries, and we're promoting the development of new ones. For instance, the University of Seychelles, we have just the one, but we've also expanded to have a Blue Economy Research Institute, very focused on building partnerships with universities and institutions for the promotion of blue economy and sharing our lessons learned. You may also note on my slide that we have the logo of the Commonwealth Secretariat, and this is because they've been instrumental in assisting us to date in the last 3 years in developing a roadmap. They've also helped us with assessments of key sectors, and here I'd like to note in particular aquaculture, marine renewable energy, and biotechnology. These were 3 areas that Seychelles to date had not ventured too far in. We were still on the traditional systems of work, and we wanted to see what opportunities existed in these 3 areas and whether they were viable, if it would be cost effective for us. So we have done some assessments. Our ministries are looking at the best path, which options would work best for our current setup. So we also have with the Commonwealth a consultant that will be starting in January 2016 for 2 years, based in Seychelles, to facilitate the next big step, which is now that we've defined the concept, the overall objectives, and therefore the vision, which has been adopted by the people. In this regard, I mean government, civil society, private sector, through national workshops that were done. The next phase is now to translate the vision that we have. Everybody's agreed this one fits our model best, into very specific sector plans so that they can be rolled out by each sector, coordinating, cross-cutting, but that they would do the projects as they go along. And lastly, so we're on the last slide now, Julian, it should be the one called innovative financing mechanisms. I just wanted to mention a couple of new initiatives that the Seychelles has worked on in the last year or so, with tagged with the blue economy. For us to reduce our national debt, we had a macro reform program in 2008 with the IMF, a lot of changes to our economy. We decided to maintain sustainable development, and therefore the ocean resource, because that is where we get all our most of the GDP, had to be more focus of development moving forward. So we've worked on a marine spatial plan, the MSP, which is in its final stages, and the MSP has assisted in doing one of the first in the world depth adaptation swap, but looking at the ocean. So there are depth adaptation swaps around the world, there are examples, but we've developed a fund which we've now been able to secure 30 million from our debt creditors. So we're paying back a debt process by ensuring that the 30 million of our debt cut goes into a trust fund, which will only be used for projects and developments and research linked to the marine spatial plan, linked to environmental sustainable development projects. And the trust will then generate the bond that we need to repay back to the creditors. And turnover over the years will then feed back into the trust fund, creating a system of a financing system which we can then continue to use over the next 50, 60, 70 years. Very, very long term, not something as a short-term process. Another initiative that we've worked on, but for a smaller scale, is the Seychelles Blue Bond Initiative, which we've been working with the Prince of Wales Sustainability Unit. This is a very specific capital raising transaction where we fund a 10 million bond to fund the implementation of one particular management plan. And it's a fisheries demersal fisheries management plan for our main island. So we've been able to operationalize the cost of our plan to research and monitoring, compliance and enforcement. So it'll be a one-off 10 million bond, but a blue bond, because it's going to be tagged to ocean management, fisheries as the key sector. It's based on the green bonds, which has generated quite a bit of interest and funding opportunities, but we will be the first to apply an ocean, a blue bond, sorry, so an ocean-related service to it. So these are, in a nutshell, some of the ideas and the work of progress that we've done. The Seychelles is also hosting the second Blue Economy Summit in collaboration with the UAE. This will take place in Abu Dhabi on the 19th of January 2016 during their Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. The UAE have been a key partner with Seychelles in the last 2 years on showcasing and promoting the blue economy. And the side event is also tagged to the energy event, so IRENA's main conference, and therefore there's that clear link between Sustainable Week and the energy needs for various countries. We also have an ocean festival, which is held every year in the month of November, and a series of activities are done at ministerial level as well as civil society, with predominantly a lot of education and awareness activities for the children, diving to various different groups that don't have access, And it's a very interesting or very vibrant way of bringing oceans into the culture on a day-to-day basis. We're also, on the international scene, members of various organizations that have adopted the blue economy. And here, for example, I note the African Union with its maritime strategy, which is included in the 2063 agenda. The Seychelles is part of the working task force. And this is one of the ways we want to ensure that the understanding of blue economy from a small island state has a voice and is included at these international arenas. Because in the past, Africa was very much seen as a continental land issue we had to deal with. And the islands of the Indian Ocean included the aspect of ocean, which is just as important because a lot of the trade and transport to Africa goes via the ocean. That this was a missing link. And all of that ties in very nicely with the SDGs. And we work tirelessly with a lot of AOSIS, therefore with a lot of your other leaders, through the Alliance of Small Island States to keep SDG Goal 14, which was regarding oceans management. So moving forward, this offers a lot of opportunity, but we have to have a way of changing the business model. This is one of the key messages that the Seychelles is trying to showcase, and it does have a cost, but there are innovative ways to find new financing to generate this paradigm shift. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca and Julian. We're now going to go to our Q&A session, roughly about 20 minutes. And let's see if we have any questions from you.
I've seen 2 questions. Maybe I can share the questions to our presenters.
Okay. Now, Rebecca, you won't be able to see these questions, so I suggest that. Okay, that's fine.
So the first question, it's how difficult is it for countries to reach the stage of the value-added products of one sector in the blue economy becoming an input for another sector? That is, links between fisheries and tourism. What policies are important for this?
Yeah, there is a question before that. There is a question before that, if we can just, David B. is asking, how do you plan to create higher value jobs? I think this might be aimed at Rebecca. Rebecca, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I was trying to put the microphone back on.
Okay, the first question from one of our participants is, how do you plan to create higher value jobs?
Okay, I'll use one particular sector where we've done most of our research at the moment is in the fishery sector. A lot of the tuna, that is landed in Seychelles, is transshipped. We wanted to add, therefore, not just to take the heads and tails off and send off the fish, but that there is a value to using the entire fish. And in order to use an entire fish, what we call zero waste of tuna, as an example, you have to create new systems. For instance, if we're going to use the heads for fish oil, as an example, the physical infrastructure has to be in place. You have to have people to work in the new machinery and the new technology. And this is not the traditional jobs that is being promoted or has been encouraged. It creates new capacity. It requires new skills and expertise. And we believe that investing in of our fisheries products, even, for example, how to prepare certain fish products, local fish products. So we land a lot of the fish, it is just sold fresh, but if we could turn, for instance, into steaks or fish fingers, it becomes value addition, but also it's creating a new step in the process of value of the fish. So there would be new kitchens, extra value jobs for the cooking, looking at new technologies of preparing fish, and not just in the traditional ways. So for us, we're really looking at expanding our base on how we treat the products or the resources that we're bringing in. And that's just fisheries. And if we look at aquaculture or biotechnology, which are very new sectors for us, that opens also a large amount of new job opportunities, but at a level which perhaps the system hadn't been catered for in the past. So we want to train our young graduates and pitch them for their return salaries at a level which allows us to keep them in country, but also the capacity can then be transferred, and we do not have to rely so much on international consultants or experts. This is a bit how we're trying to value addition to our products has to create extra value jobs for the current system. Small businesses at the moment are completely missed out because a lot of, if I go back to the tuna example, tuna comes in on the fish, on the purseines, and it is transshipped out. If we were to use a lot of the products in country, small businesses can be generated for services that's added to it, ice production, bait, but you need storage, you need equipment, you need the skills. We feel that we can encourage those job opportunities in the country rather than missing that little link. I know it's a bit of an all-encompassing answer, but I hope I've been able to tackle most of it.
Thank you, Rebecca. There's another question coming through. It's a question I think that's linked to the value chain that Julian talked about. How difficult is it for countries to reach the stage of value-added products of one sector in the blue economy becoming an input for another sector? Basically, I think, how do you get to combine those value chains, Julian?
Well, I think the answer to the question is quite a complex one, and it very much depends on where the country is starting from. So if you already have some links in the value chain, such as fish processing in Seychelles, then it's much easier to develop that. But many countries are starting from a almost zero base. So it's a matter of identifying which part of the value chain you want to capture. And one example that has come up recently is the nation of Kiribati. And Kiribati is a small island state which is very widely dispersed across the Pacific, has a huge EEZ, but very, very small islands. They have just recently developed their first tuna processing factory on the main island, South Tarawa. So they've taken that step, that first step of moving from simply selling licenses for fishing boats to actually landing, handling and processing small amounts of tuna in country and then exporting the processed product. And I think there are other countries, certainly in the Pacific, that are looking at that sort of model. I think in terms of linking the value chains, this comes back, I think, to the point that Rebecca was making, which is you need to have somebody overarching and driving the process so that the different sectors understand how they fit into the blue economy. And I think once the different sectors understand how the blue economy impacts them and what the value of the blue economy is to their sector, then it becomes a lot easier. But the overarching sort of policy has to be one that gets everyone aligned and moving towards a common goal, if you like. So there has to be a sort of a countrywide strategic objective that everyone's striving towards. I don't know whether you want to comment on that, Rebecca, in terms of your own experience in Seychelles.
Yes, thank you. I think just following on from what you said, Julian, I'll give another example. When you talk about the overarching, because it is very much linked, and one of the questions we had when we developed the department was, where does it fit? It's a cross-cutting theme. For small islands like ourselves, the ocean, we can always see the ocean from a horizon. It completely surrounds us. So all our activities, even health, relates to the ocean. So the national development strategy, the plans, all have to go in the same direction, and a decision has to be taken at the national level. For instance, petroleum. This really puts into a sharp contrast if a country wants to go down the road of petroleum exploration, mineral extraction, the impact it has on the environment and the ecosystem. You have to have a national discussion and decision on to what extent, to what limits, where are the trade-offs. And it's when you have those discussions, which is also something we did through the Marine Spatial Plan, which is a zoning exercise. It looks at where activities, where the different sectors have their main focus, and they overlap. The links are very clear. Tourism activity with fisheries activities, one port, everything tends to land there, transport, maritime security, your fishing, your tourism. When you start having that conversation about what activities are priority, what services do we have to add to increase, it creates automatically the links. And the overarching national strategy, what allows you to understand or decide how much money goes where to help what sector. Where does training have to be increased, or research, or capacity building? And in the development of one sector, the spin-offs are inevitable into another sector, and the link is very quickly created. In fact, we found that we had sectors coming up to us and saying, well, you forgot us, health, you know, or our diets are completely on fish. That's the predominant diet that we have, and how can you therefore exclude health and the health management plans for the future if you don't have it part of the blue economy strategy at the beginning? So those elements will come out. The links are created quite quickly. How you manage them is the real question.
Thank you, Rebecca. What I think we'll do now is just do a quick summary of where we are and what we covered this afternoon and this evening in this discussion. What I think is coming out is quite a few commonalities from both presentations. Both Rebecca and Julian stressed that it's a concept. It's not new, it's not separate, but there's need to build it into the current domestic architecture. Another key link is the area of the importance of research. Rebecca's examples of the research institute within the university and the importance of having research to develop new areas of expertise. I think that's something that was common in both presentations. I think Rebecca also was touching on the importance of embedding this within the institutional framework at the national level, driving it from within, and also the need to generate that knowledge base where people become aware of the importance of the blue economy in everything they do. We had the question on value chains and how you can combine your value chains to achieve the same objective. There's also, I think, coming out of this, Rebecca touched on a few activities upcoming, both at the beginning of 2016 and towards the end of 2016, which have both an international outlook and a domestic national outlook, where the importance of getting the word out of the importance of the blue economy in Seychelles is paramount. Some of those other initiatives that Rebecca also touched on cover the finance aspect, the debt for adaptation swap, the Blue Bond Initiative, and some of those other initiatives that are coming out of her government. I don't know if we have time for a quick summary from each of you. Julian, if you could put it in a nutshell, what would you want to close with?
Well, I think for me, it's really about looking at what the ocean currently means to your national development, and thinking about how you can manage that resource to sustain your future needs, but also how you can look at extracting greater value from what you're doing. But the critical underpinning factor of all of this is that we need to put utilization of the marine environment and the ocean resources on a sustainable footing. Small island states are so intrinsically linked to the ocean that if we don't manage to get that nexus, then the future development of countries hangs very much in the balance in the next decades.
Rebecca, quick closing words from you before I hand back to Khadeen.
I join Julian in exactly that. The only point to add is changing the way we think, and people to join us in this paradigm shift is not easy. The conversation has to continue at every step, and there will be, you can change a little bit the course as development changes, but changing the way we do business is a process. It's not just a plan or a strategy that gets written and it will be implemented. It's a much more transient process that you embark on, and it has longer repercussions.
Thank you both, Rebecca and Julian. Now handing back to Khadeen for an outline of what's coming up with UNDP.
Thank you. Thank you. So a heartfelt thank you to all of our speakers, Rebecca and Julian, of course to our hosts at the Commonwealth Secretariat, to all of our participants, both online and offline, to our partners, and of course to our Caribbean Future Forum team. It was indeed an insightful session. Coming up, we have on the 14th of December, our webinar that will be on climate change. It would be a sort of post-mortem to the Paris Climate Change Conference. You can continue to follow and contribute to this discussion that we had today online at CaribbeanFutureForum.com. You can stay in the loop with what's happening by visiting our website, liking our Facebook page, Caribbean Future Forum, and by following us on Twitter at Forum_Caribbean. Again, I want to say thanks and do enjoy the rest of your day.